Are you guys seeing this? These are really interesting. I've always been very curious about these. These are the filters that you actually put behind the lens, right where the actual sensor itself is. And if your camera can only do 1/4000th of a second shutter and you're trying to photograph wide open at f1.4, you're not able to do that because it's so overly exposed. This filter actually allows you to shoot wide open. This is by a company called Kase. Now, a lot of people may have heard this company. They're pretty much well known when it comes to these kind of filters and ND filters that you actually have on your lens. But recently, they're actually entering into the lens market, which I know a lot of third-party companies are actually doing because they're realizing that there is a market there. Now, one interesting thing is Kase is entering into the full-frame market when it comes to portrait autofocus lenses. This is the 85mm f1.4 lens that we're going to be having a look at, Sony E-mount version. So the Kase 85mm lens has a maximum aperture in an f1.4 and a minimum aperture of f16. It has a front filter thread of 72mm, which has a magnetic design for clip-on filters. It has two function buttons, an autofocus to manual focus switch. The aperture ring is declickable. There's a USB-C port for firmware updates, a lens mount gasket for weather sealing, and it weighs a total of 585 grams. So I've actually completed a couple of different shoots when it comes to this lens with photography and videography. Now I've actually done my typical gym shoots with Cam, fantastic IFBB Pro bodybuilder. We did a lot of videos and photos in Riggs Gym, which allows me to control my lighting, but I don't have to use that f1.4 for low light situations. But I did want to use f1.4 just to see how autofocus will hold up in real life situations. And the second gig was just a paid shoot for a family shoot that I actually just utilized the ZV-E1, and I actually just did portrait because it was only for Instagram. So it was only video for Instagram, but there were some interesting results in that one. So when it came to the fitness shoot, the autofocus worked pretty much exactly how it should work. Like, this was wide open at f1.4 and it was nice and tacky. Pretty much performed just like my G Master lenses in majority of the situations. Now, you do have to go into your specific camera and make sure you optimize the autofocus performance already for any given lens anyway. And even when it came to photography, this thing was absolutely tack sharp and perfect autofocus almost all the time. It really worked perfectly with the A7 IV and I had absolutely no issues. It was when we went to the outdoor family shoot is when it kind of tripped up a couple of times. It really does come down to which camera you're using, how good the autofocus and object tracking actually is, and what your settings are. But the one thing about the ZV-E1 is that I had my autofocus speed just a little bit too fast. The shift sensitivity was actually at level 5 and the transition speed was at 7. I completely forgot to adjust these. Definitely dial those back if you want smooth autofocus transitions, but then it not shift off your subject too fast. So definitely dial these back. It makes it so much better. But look, with majority of the situations with the outdoor shoot, it worked absolutely perfect. There is absolutely no issues when it comes to video autofocus. And then even if I just do a generic studio test, it works perfectly fine. Like I said, it comes down to the sensitivity of what your autofocus is, what camera you're using, but you shouldn't really have any issues with this lens. So let's talk about bokeh. Now, bokeh is really interesting when it comes to the character. You can see here in some of the portrait videos with the family shoot, it almost gives like a vintage sort of vibe. There's just some special sauce about what the character is when it comes to the out of focus backgrounds. I personally really like it. It's not like a really clinically clean Sony GM lens. There is some sort of character to that, and like I said, I really like that. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you like this look? I love it. And that is one thing with G Master lenses. Like, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love clinically clean lenses for very specific times and locations and shoots, but it really depends on obviously the shoot. And sometimes I like a bit of a dirty lens that has some character to it. You know, I really wish lenses actually did offer two different versions, like a clean lens and a character version. I know Sony don't like to have character. They just prefer clinically clean, sharp, and absolutely perfect, which is fine. But like I said, sometimes I just want something with a little bit of character. So let's check out the image quality chart with this lens. Now, this is one thing that I am absolutely blown away by. In the center, it is absolutely tack sharp, just as it is out to the corners. So the center to edge sharpness is absolutely pristine, just like a G Master lens. This lens is phenomenal and also holds really nice contrast wide open at f1.4. Obviously, if you stop it down, I mean, it can get sharper, but it's already crazy sharp at 1.4. And even if you go to the minimum aperture of f16, it still is really sharp. It doesn't really lose too much sharpness and contrast when it comes to diffraction. The only very minor downside I can see right here happens to come down to the pin cushioning. Some people don't like any sort of pin cushioning or any kind of distortion on an 85mm lens, but you can use a lens correction to fix this. Then when it comes to the longitudinal chromatic aberrations, I mean, it pretty much has none. It is fantastically clean. And similarly with any sort of purple and green fringing, there doesn't really seem to be any, so it's a very clean lens, but with really nice character. So in terms of the overall image sharpness, when it comes to the stills and videography, you really can tell when you are wide open at f1.4. Like, you don't actually have to stop down to get a really nice sharp image. And like you saw from that image chart, edge to edge, that's just absolutely insane. So when it comes to portraiture, I mean, you probably would stop it down anyway, just so you don't have such a shallow depth of field, but you do have that ability to photograph or film at f1.8 and not lose any image quality, which is crazy just for a budget lens. Now, when it comes to flaring, this is one thing that was very interesting that I didn't really spot in my studio. When I actually did the family shoot, I was actually getting some really interesting flaring artifacts, which I haven't really seen before in many lenses. Now, this could be a pro or a con if you do like it or not like it. There were some rainbow artifacts that were sort of hitting the lens from the sun at a very particular angle. Now, personally, I love any kind of flaring artifacts. It just gives it a little bit of source. But if you're looking for a lens that is super clean in these kind of situations, maybe stay away from the sun, or obviously utilize that sun hood, because in these kind of situations, the sun can't hit the lens at that very particular angle, and that'll pretty much mitigate it completely. But when it comes to utilizing this in direct sunlight, you actually get some really nice sort of flaring artifacts. Nothing too crazy, doesn't ghost that much. It's a pretty decent portrait lens, but you do have to take that flaring into consideration, so the sun hood is the go there. Okay, let's talk about this rear filter. Now, they did actually include this within the kit. Now, while I don't do photo as often as I do video work, this is a really great tool to use. Obviously, if you do photograph wide open at f1.4, most likely your shutter speed won't be fast enough to keep the image exposed correctly. You may actually have some blown out highlights on really sunny days. Now, the rating on this ND filter is an ND2, so it will cut back on the light just enough for you to be able to photograph wide open at f1.4. But if you don't want to deal with this, obviously you can just put a filter on the front of the lens and it have pretty much the same effect. But it's really interesting, whether you actually like to use this or not, it purely is dependent on you, but it is a really cool thing that they actually do include this. Now, because Kase is a filter company, they do actually include this, which is a magnetic filter that actually snaps directly onto the lens itself, so you don't actually have to screw anything else on there. This will actually just literally clip straight on. And even with the front lens protector as well is magnetic, so all you need to do is literally just put it straight on and pull it straight off. The interesting thing is that the filter is a lot stronger when it comes to that magnetic, so when you put the actual case on and you try and take that off, it's not going to be taking both of them off at the same time, which could get really annoying. It literally just takes the front protector off and it leaves that filter on the front. Now, I do applaud Kase for this kind of design, because it's just really good that they're thinking outside the box and just supplying extra features than just having a regular lens itself, because that just adds a little bit of versatility in what you could actually have with the lens. So when it comes to weather sealing, you do have that gasket on the back there when it comes to the mount. So you're going to get some really nice weather sealing right there at your lens mount. When it comes to weather sealing around the whole lens, not 100% sure if it's going to be as good as G Master lenses, but at least it has that gasket at the back. Now, when it comes to the features, you do actually have 2 function buttons. Obviously, that is a great thing, and they do feel really tactile and not actually cheap. This whole lens itself actually feels quite premium. Specifically, when you are thinking about this on the budget realm, this does actually feel like the premium budget. It almost feels, I guess, just as good as a G Master lens. Like, I'm really impressed with this build quality, and it definitely does pack a little bit of weight as well. Now, when it comes to the focus ring, this is really smooth. Kase have actually done a really good job with this. It doesn't sound, really crunchy. It's very smooth and also has a little bit of resistance as well. Like some focus rings are actually too smooth. I like it when it has a little bit of resistance. And then obviously your aperture ring is clickable or declickable as well, which obviously for videographers, declickable is a good option, but I like to leave it in auto anyway, majority of the situations. Now, one interesting thing about the manual focus ring, when you actually manual focus, obviously it's fly by wire, but if you actually pull focus and you let go, it kind of just keeps focusing just a little bit. Like there's a very small delay, but the manual focus is actually quite smooth. I really like how you actually pull focus with this. But if you try and pull too fast, it won't actually match your speed. Whether that's a pro or con, it really just depends on obviously your personal preference and how you manual focus. But I really like how this focuses manually. And if you do focus from close to far, there does seem to be a little bit of focus breathing as well. Now price, this is one thing we do have to talk about because it's kind of at the top end of that budget realm. It's still not even close when it comes to the 85 1.4 GM lens. Like that thing is like twice the price of this. So you do have to take that into consideration if you are comparing these kind of budget lenses to the G Master lens. And would you, prefer getting the G Master lens or something at this price? So look, overall, this lens is actually a really good option when it comes to that portrait photography and videography length, 85 millimeters and a fast f1.4 aperture. Obviously, is a really good selling point, and the performance is great. The flaring looks good. It's really nice tack sharp. So if that's something that you're into, this lens could be the go. So thanks for watching, my friends. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will put a link in the description below if you do want to check this lens out. Yeah, I'll see you guys at the next one. All right, let's get in.